There were 3 of us, and the silence here rang as if someone had stretched an invisible string. My name is Leo Kramer. I am 33. Technician observer, a man whose job is to listen to the way metal breathes. At the beginning of December, we landed on the ice strip near Station Sigma East, and immediately understood that the world had ended somewhere beyond the horizon line. Beyond that point, only milky light and a wind that spoke without words. The crew, the station chief, Oswald Reed, a polar veteran with the character of an ice axe, the radio operator, Nina Orlova, one of those who always fixes things on the second try, because the first one is already enough, and me, the newcomer, still smelling of training manuals. The station was a dome of aluminum and old promises. The main module, the airlock, the diesel generator room, and beneath us, a subglacial level, sealed long ago after some incident no one spoke about. We unpacked crates, checked filters, coughed at the antennas. When night came, Reed ordered us to gather in the central compartment. On the table lay a thin gray folder. Inside, regulations and one sheet with a bold headline. 7 Safety Rules. Most were boring routine. But one stood out, black against the page. Do not open the inner doors after 2 a.m., even if someone calls you by name. We exchanged glances. Reed smirked as if he'd just heard an old joke. In places like this, you don't ask questions, he said. We signed. The paper crackled like thin ice. The first days drowned in routine. The pulse of pumps, the steady knock of valves, dry reports, wind speed so-and-so, visibility 0, temperature below all meaning. On the 4th day, a blizzard came from the south. The world outside the portholes turned into white porridge, and even the floodlights couldn't pierce it. Light drowned in the storm like a lamp in milk. The station breathed heavier. The metal creaked as if it were dreaming a nightmare. Close to midnight we sat at the consoles. Nina chewed a biscuit, squinting at the external camera monitor where the gray noise behaved far too human. I was logging oscillations, Reed flipping through the journals. At exactly 2:45, the airlock gave a quiet beep. The indicator blinked. Cycle, outer hatch open, close. 10 seconds. Nothing more. We looked at each other again, this time without smiles. Who went out? Reed asked. I'm here, I answered. And I'm here, said Nina. Reed pulled the log onto the main screen. Time, after 2. User not recognized. Manual panel. Old system. No authorization. But beside it, a small anomaly appeared, like a bite mark. The temperature graph at the inner hatch dipped for a few seconds, as if someone had inhaled icy air into the station and immediately moved their mouth away. Static, Reed waved it off. The storm makes ghosts out of noise. Still, he put on his coat and went to the airlock. Nina and I watched through the internal camera. An empty vestibule, bare walls, metal like bone. Reed returned a few minutes later. All clear. Not a snowflake. The electrics are acting up, he said, but in his voice slipped something he didn't seem to notice himself. Doubt. I lay down late, but sleep here was like a sledgehammer to the skull. You shut off and cease to exist. And yet my eyes closed heavily. The line, after 2, itched beneath my skin like a splinter. The blizzard clung tighter to the station. For the next 2 days it groaned under the wind, as if some heavy presence leaned against its walls. We spoke little. At first, the silence was workmanlike. Later, it became expectation. The first to quietly crack was Nina. She sat by her radio modules, pressing the headphones tight against her ears, and she wasn't listening to stations or airports. She was listening to the emptiness on the service frequency. Over and over again, as if trying to hear an invisible child hiding and breathing too loudly. There's something there, she told me on the evening of the 6th day. On a low frequency. It's not noise. I pressed my ear into her world. At first, the familiar white static, the snowfall hiss of the ether. Then, just barely, as if through wet fabric, a breath seeped through. Wrong. Too damp for this dry air. As if someone were breathing with a mouth that shouldn't exist. Atmospheric artifacts, I exhaled. Ice rubbing on the antenna, creating a pattern. Shoo! Nina hunched. Listen. In the hissing, alien words fused together. Not ours, but sewn clumsily out of ours. Fragments of today's sentences, reassembled by unskilled hands. And then I heard my name, in my own voice, but flat, without intonation, like the way people speak in empty offices where they're only shadows. Leo, you're there. You're there. The skin at the back of my neck prickled as if surf broke over me. We called Reed. He listened, and heard only static. Spread his hands. The blizzard makes demons out of noise. Get some rest. Nina nodded, but that night she never came for her shift. The door to her cabin was locked from the inside. Reed forced it open with the emergency key. The bed was neatly made. Her coverall hung on its hook, her heavy boots standing paired and dry, as if they'd never been worn. The room was colder than the corridor. I flipped open the log and froze. The airlock had cycled again during the night. Time, just after 3. The outer hatch opened and never closed. The airlock! I shouted. Together we rushed there. The inner door showed a red light. The manual lever, pulled up. Someone had lifted that heavy bar as if with hands like ours. Reed opened it. A gust of wind blew in, carrying fine ice pellets. The outer hatch stood wide open, beyond it only formless white. The floor was dry. No tracks. As if outside wasn't a storm, but a blank screen. She couldn't have gone out, I said, what was no comfort at all. Her boots and helmet are here. Reed shut the hatch, dropped the lever. We went back to Nina's cabin again, as if a second inspection could restore logic to the world. Then I noticed under the bed a small black rectangle, our portable motion tracker. On its screen a single dot blinked. Moving slowly, steadily, somewhere beneath us, in the sealed subglacial level, a place cut off long ago by steel and time. Reed stared at the empty map as if someone were gripping his throat. "We're going down," he said, not with the voice of a commander, but of a man who knew that choice no longer existed. The hatch to the sublevel was behind the generator room. Thick steel, crude welds, jagged like someone else's teeth. We dragged in the cutter, the floodlights, 2 crowbars. Words ran out on their own. Sparks flared, the metal smoked with a sweet stench, and time turned sticky like resin. When the seam finally gave way, a breath of old cold sighed out from below, smelling of dust, rust, and something machines should never carry, time itself. A ladder led down into a dark rectangle. Reed went first, I followed. Beneath us began another world, a frozen archive, endless shelves stacked with boxes whose letters had long since vanished. Further on, a laboratory, built from things that look harmless in photographs. Heavy oscilloscopes, glass flasks coated with frost, plates inscribed with foreign words. In the dust were fresh strokes, as if someone had run fingers across it, then remembered those weren't really fingers. We found a container. Steel, rectangular, bolted shut. Several bolts lay scattered on the floor, like teeth knocked out in a rush. Together we slid the cover aside. Inside lay something burned by cold to the texture of paper. It looked human, almost. But the spine bent to where it shouldn't, the fingers were far too long, the joints too many. On its frostbitten skin, a tag with worn symbols and a year I didn't dare pronounce aloud. But the tracker still showed movement, and not here. On the concrete wall nearby, I spotted scratches. Deep, fresh, like claw marks carved into soft butter. Their edges sharp, free of frost. On the floor, a few dark drops. Fresh blood, in a place where time had nothing left to feed on. We searched the entire basement. No one. No sign of Nina, not even a shadow. We went back up and shut the hatch with its punishing weight of steel. I threw on every lock I could find. Reed, silent, added a chain. We both knew it wasn't protection, just a charm to keep our minds steady. From then on, life became one long inhale. We reinforced the lights around the perimeter, switched on every camera, listened to noises as if they were verdicts. The blizzard began to ease. The station grew calm, like a beast that no longer thrashed in its cage, not because it was tired, but because it had learned how to lift the latch. That night, when my shift had pushed past midnight, the camera by the generator room caught movement. Between the dome and the steel housing stood a figure in a polar suit. The height, the build, like one of us. I checked Reed's cabin. He was asleep, heavy, fists clenched even in dreams. I returned to the monitor. The figure turned its head, too slowly, as if muscles were missing. Then it walked along the station side, avoiding the floodlights, as though it already knew where the blind spots were. "Wake up," I whispered into the intercom. We watched the recording together. Reed muttered, "Nina." I wanted to agree, but couldn't. The silhouette, yes. But the walk was wrong. We tried to project the signal onto the main screen. The camera flickered, streaked with interference, then went black. Then the next one. And another. The periphery went blind, as if someone were flicking off switches with fingers they shouldn't have. "Coincidence doesn't exist," Reed said quietly. By morning he decided to go out. Nothing could stop him. He suited up, checked his oxygen, grabbed his tools, and headed for the airlock the way a man goes to an altar, not to a foreign god, but to his own stubbornness. "Keep the inner door shut until I give the word," he told me. I nodded. Watched the small monitor where he was just a figurine against a white backdrop, listened to his breathing. Steady, confident, human. He walked the perimeter, commenting on cable channels, then fell silent. "Leo, there are tracks here," he said after a pause. "Lots of them. They're strange." "Strange how?" "Like boots. Narrow and long. Too many, as if one person walked for himself and his neighbor. And at the antenna mast. Hold on." His footsteps crackled louder, faster. Breathing heavier. A sleeve, Reed exhaled. "Looks like Nina's." Torn. The connection didn't end with a scream. Just silence. Air no longer passed through the mic, and silence itself became sound. The life support indicators stayed green. The system insisted he was breathing. But he wasn't answering. His marker froze 50 meters from the station, a point on skin you can't scratch. That evening, when the sky turned grayer than the ice, the radio came alive and began to repeat, obedient and flat, a voice that wasn't hers. Nina's voice, but not Nina. A phrase looped like a broken music box. "I opened it. Thought it was you. I opened it. Thought it was you." I sat there listening until the words blurred into buzzing, and then into silence. Reed's suit marker stayed green until dawn, and by morning it simply vanished. Not red. Not error. Nothing. Empty. That left me, and the station, which had heard too much. I barricaded the corridor leading to the living block with crates, sealed the bulkheads, cranked the internal microphones to maximum. The hum of fans and the thin song of circulation filled the compartment like the breath of some beast lying beside you, not to devour, but to keep you warm. I listened for a long time, and then, from the metallic gut of the air duct, came a scraping. Not sharp. Wet. Something soft was rubbing against the walls, moving toward me through the ventilation like the smell of food creeping through kitchen pipes. A red warning light flared on the panel. Unauthorized entry. Biosignature not recognized. Registered on station. 1 human. The system both confirmed and denied my reality. The scraping above me stopped. In the corridor, something heavy shoved my crates from the inside, as though the furniture had remembered it wasn't a wall. I ran to the server room, the only place where the metal was thick as a prayer. The door sealed with a wheel lock. The first blow struck as I turned it from the inside. The second left a dent shaped like a pressed hand, too long, too narrow. I switched on the lights. Hundreds of green LEDs blinked in the racks like winter insects. From the terminal I shot an emergency ping through the satellite, a short help with coordinates. No answer. Only the polite silence of the void. I pulled up the feed from the last camera still alive, mounted right above the server room door, aimed at the corridor. Empty. And then, slowly, a face lowered into view against the lens. Human. Almost. No eyelids. Pupils stretched vertical, like the night had stayed too long in its eyes. It pressed against the glass so I could see. So I could understand whose voice had called Nina after 2 a.m. So I would realize the station wasn't home only to us. The face lingered on the lens like a mask someone had forgotten to remove. It didn't blink. The fog of breath spread across the glass, then faded on its own, as if the air were being pulled in the opposite direction. The first blow rattled the door. The metal shivered, and inside me everything shivered with it. I found myself counting the server's lights like pulses on a dying patient. 1, 2, 3. Steady. I had to stop staring into those eyes and start thinking with my hands. I opened the local control panel, pulled out an old, resentful wiring diagram. The server room fed off 2 lines, each grounded separately. If I removed protection, rerouted the load onto a single path, I could force a dirty circuit through the central module floor. Power would strike where it was thin. But that was repeating someone else's solution. And to repeat meant to play by someone else's rules. I knew more than cables in this belly. Beneath the dome ran the air regeneration system, with an archaic reserve loop. A liquid absorber that, in emergency, could strip oxygen to near zero and replace it with a dry mix that made humans dizzy but spared machinery. For the living, a trap. For mechanics, just a switch. If I funneled the entire volume not into modules, but into one corridor. A dull scrape over the door. It was searching for a gap. No words, no pretending to be human, just persistence. The stubbornness of matter that had decided it, too, had a purpose. I opened the comms archive. Found Reed's voice quickly, sharp, clipped, like nails hammered into wood. I cut out 2 words. Hold the hatch. I broadcast them through a speaker at the far end of the living sector. Click. The command scattered through empty corridors like keys tossed on a table. Silence fell outside my door. The corridor camera caught a blurred shadow. It stretched, slid sideways, moved away from my threshold, toward the echo of a familiar command. I spun the wheel, slipped out of the server room, and headed the opposite way, to the tech zone, where the regeneration block stood. The corridor's light was green and low, like water beneath ice. The station groaned against the wind, and I walked to its rhythm like to a metronome. The console greeted me like an old acquaintance, indifferent to what I'd become. I pulled off the cover. Pipes, filters, vent valves, all in place. I killed the breakers, forced the pumps into manual override, reassigned airflow into 2 isolated sections. 1. The central passage. The other, the corridor leading to the living block. Bridged the circuits, set a 30-breath delay. Enough to run, enough to lure. On the camera feeds, movement flickered. A figure in Nina's suit stood at the door to our common compartment, tilting its head as if listening to the wall. Or to my heart, hammering loud enough to feed the PA system. I switched on the speaker by the central console. "Nina, your audio channel is open." The figure moved a shoulder. Very slowly. Too slowly for a human whose name had just been called. Then it turned, suddenly, without inertia, like a camera on a flawless tripod, and started toward me. I pulled back into the command module, left the door cracked open, a trap for shadows. Hid behind the NAV console, palm on the regeneration panel, where the timer ticked away, almost there. My heartbeat matched the unseen countdown. It entered. The suit hung off its frame like clothes draped over a mannequin missing bones. The steps weren't steps, soft as falling dust. Its head turned toward me. Eyes, lidless, black vertical pupils. Not human. Just interested. "Leo," came through the wall speaker in my own voice. "Hold the hatch." I almost laughed at that warped mirror. Somewhere else, Reed's clipped voice still echoed from the far corridor. 2 lures, 2 sugar cubes for the same hungry colony. It stepped further in, stopped dead center, right beneath the intake vent, where the air came down like water from an ice hole. The timer clicked inside me, not on the panel. I slammed my palm onto the switch. Valves shut like cards on a table. The corridor and command module filled with dry, suffocating air. Not smell, the absence of it. Not wind, the absence of air itself. My ears rang like strings. I crouched, counting breaths aloud to keep control. 1, 2, 3. The thing stopped and, for the first time, made a movement that could be called alive, reflexive. It lifted its head, lips opening like gills. Its chest froze a moment, as if it had forgotten where the button for inhale was. 4, 5, 6. The emptiness rose, light and sticky as cotton candy. My temples turned white. The creature wavered, shifted toward the door, but it was already sealed. It didn't lunge, didn't strike, didn't claw. Just stood watching me, like I was an error it could afford to outweight. 7, 8, 9. Its arms extended. Fingers long, thin, bare, like green cuttings shoved into a borrowed suit. Its skin grayed, or maybe that was just the light. In its hollow gaze stirred an attempt. The mouth closed, opened again. "Leo," it said in my voice, softer this time, as if learning. "Don't." 10, 11, 12. I held its stare, though my skin crawled to flee. Air was ending everywhere at once. In the room, in my head, in my plans. My hands trembled on the console like compass needles over a magnetic desert. 13, 14, 15. The creature tried a step and failed. Knees bent at wrong angles, as if designed by someone who'd only seen humans through glass. It collapsed to the floor. Its face pressed against the metal plate. Pupils ballooned into black coins. Its mouth gaped wider than natural, tearing at the corners. Silence sharpened into bone. 16, 17, 18. Darkness swam into my head. I hit the reverse cycle. Air rushed in like water remembering itself. My temples hammered. The thing lay where it had fallen, stretched out, weightless, hollow. I waited. Another breath. And another. It didn't move. I didn't want to go near it. Instead, I circled wide, keeping distance, and switched on the ceiling side camera. Let the lens watch it, not my eyes. The feed showed the same thing. the body still there, chest unmoving, mouth shut, fingers long and bloodless, like they'd been poured from ice. I didn't check for a pulse. I didn't want to touch it. I cracked the door open just enough to slip back into the server room, spun the wheel shut behind me, leaned my forehead against the cold steel and listened to my own breathing. Alive. Human. Fragile. On the terminal, an icon flickered, then vanished. A short flash, like a satellite relay confirming my distress call. The signal was still out there, rolling across the sky like a red fish in black water. Someone far above had heard, marked it, maybe even replied. But the air between us devoured the words. I wanted to shut everything down and just sit. But my eyes dragged themselves to the corridor feed. The body in the command module lay unchanged. The heat haze above it shimmered like a mirage, though no warmth remained. Fine. Stick to the plan. Secure what still holds. Check the perimeter. Log the session. And wait for what? Nothing but the clock on the wall, a useless toy where time had no power. I grabbed the emergency headlamp, the keys to the sublevel hatch, I don't know why, maybe just to keep my hands holding something, and went back to the command module. The smell of metal and dry dust hit like raw alcohol. I came closer, at a safe distance, and realized I'd been wrong about safety. The face on the floor turned. Slowly. Too slowly. Not with muscles, not with the neck, as if someone were rotating an image on a screen. The eyes were open. Pupils narrow, vertical, with a tiny spark inside. The mouth stretched. What came out wasn't a voice, but a sound. Like glass grinding on glass, trying to become a word. N-I-na. I stumbled back. My hand found the crowbar by the wall on its own. Useless weight against a metal that only laughs. The creature didn't rise. It couldn't. But the sound came again. This time closer to human. Closer to our safe little hello. Like someone reaching for the right note without knowing why. Habit saved me. Don't look where fear drags you, look where the exit is. At the edge of the frame, I noticed the shimmer of light. Not from the body. From the floor. A tile vibrating faintly, like skin bristling. Not from dying fans. From something below. The sublevel. Nina's tracker had shown a dot there. Remember? Yesterday, just one. Today, for a split second, I saw a second flicker. Then it died. Or maybe I just wanted to believe it was a glitch. Leo, the voice came again. My own timbre, neat, precise, hold the hatch. I looked up at the charred stillness. No sound. The mouth didn't move. The camera still showed the same. Body, tile, air, mirage. The voice wasn't coming from there. I turned my head slowly to the ceiling. In the corner, where the ducts met, the darkness was thicker. Something glinted, like a wet eye, or a drop of water. And I understood, the trap in the middle hadn't caught everything. The center is only where we stare. The paths always come from the sides. I killed the speakers. Air went flat. Picked up the radio, dead, but my hand clutched it anyway, like a crucifix that doesn't protect but helps you breathe. And walked to the sublevel hatch. The locks were intact, the chain pulled tight. The metal bled cold. From below rose a sound, not scraping, not whispering. A slow, heavy murmur, like water being forced to circle until it learns to speak. I pressed my ear against it, and I heard two voices, mine and Nina's, repeating different phrases we had definitely spoken in the past days above, overlapping like badly mixed tracks, splitting, merging, birthing a third, empty, like an echo in a well. I stumbled back, met the gaze of that stillness on the floor, and for the first time saw in it not predatory hunger, but longing, the simplest kind. Like a child clutching the edge of a new language, not knowing which side to bite. Leo came from the duct almost without delay. Open. I closed my eyes for a single breath, opened them, and took the most human thing I had left, besides fear, a hand recorder. Pressed the red button and, steady, as if reading instructions, said, "After 2, do not open, even if someone calls you by name." I looped that cycle through every speaker in the station. Let it hear our rules, the way we had heard its lack of them. Let it imitate. Let it try to live by paper not its own. The corridors filled with the phrase, simple as a nail. The station heard itself. Something above shifted back. Below, the noise faltered, like footsteps losing rhythm. And then everything grew thinner, as if the frozen desert had bent an ear toward our little dome, and decided to listen, too. I knew there was no more time. Not for night decisions, not for the right ones. A side had to be chosen. And I had only one, the side of what breathes, of what airs, the living. I took the toolkit, strapped on the headlamp, cast one last look at the motionless body in the command room, and moved to the hatch. Downward. Into the dark. Into what the station had hidden because it couldn't understand. My hand closed on the frozen chain. The metal sang, thin, almost kind. I inhaled deeply and began removing the locks. The cover didn't swing free right away. The bolts resisted like living things, unwilling to release what they kept. The last one snapped with a sound that went down my spine like ice water. I lifted the lid. A breath of ancient, arid air rushed up, smelling of iron and something sweet, rotten, like sugar left too long in the snow. The ladder dropped 5 meters into shadow. I aimed my light, frost-lined walls, like the inside of an old freezer that had forgotten its job. I stepped down. The air was heavier, metallic. One rung. Another. Each creak exploded like a gunshot in the silence. At the bottom stretched a corridor in both directions. Concrete walls, low ceiling, pipes rimmed with frost. Silence so dense it seemed any moment you might hear the station's heart beating in the walls. I switched on the recorder, speaking softly, so at least the metal would know I hadn't lost my mind. Leo Kramer. Descending into the lower level. My voice rang too loudly, and the echo was longer. A second later, from the dark, came my own voice in reply, but with different words. Descending here. I froze. Swung the beam left. Nothing. Right. Nothing. But the air had grown heavier. I moved, crowbar in hand like a blind man's cane. After some meters, the corridor opened into a vast archive. Ranks of metal shelving, stacked with boxes. Lined up like soldiers, but some shifted, as if someone had been through recently. On the floor, tracks. Not human. Narrow, elongated, as though barefoot, but with extra joints. I stopped. My light caught gouges in the wall. Fresh. Sharp. Like wounds. I brushed them with my fingers, cold, and the chill ran up into my shoulders. Leo whispered behind me. I spun. Nothing. Just shelves. Just dust. But the voice was mine. My intonation. As if I'd spoken into my own ear. The recorder in my hand blinked red. And then from its speaker came a loop. Leo. 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 I realized it wasn't only recording. It was repeating. And not like a machine should. I stuffed it back in my pocket and pressed on. The next door opened into a laboratory. My beam swept across benches, all crusted in frost. In the glassware, frozen droplets stared like eyes. Old liquids lay in hardened puddles of strange colors. And in the center, a massive container, like a sarcophagus. Open. I approached. Inside, empty. The mummified body Reed and I had found yesterday was gone. The crowbar slipped from my hands. My heart fluttered like a trapped bird. I stepped closer. Only rags remained, a tag with a number, but no body. On the lip of the sarcophagus, fresh marks. Drops of blood, still liquid. Then, from behind the wall, a screech. Something long, clawed, scraping concrete. I lifted the crowbar, swept the light. For an instant, in the doorway, a profile. Human. Nina. Her face ashen, lips cracked, eyes too wide. She stood staring, mouth moving soundlessly, like rehearsing words. Nina. I shouted. She stepped once. The light flickered. And when it steadied, the doorway was empty. I ran there. Nothing. Only a shadow sliding down the far corridor. I pulled out the recorder again. From its speaker came my voice. But not what I had said. It was speaking for me. She is inside. You opened. My throat locked. I snapped it off and ran back toward the passage. One thought in my head, get topside, before the station decided I belonged to it too. But above, another sound was waiting. From the airlock came a muffled chime. The panel flashed, outer hatch, open. I ran. On the monitor a figure appeared. Tall, in Reed's suit. He stood at the threshold, back to me, staring into the endless white beyond the door. Reed! I shouted. The figure turned slowly. His face was gray, eye sockets filled with vertical black pupils. He raised a hand, touched the camera. The screen went black. In my headset, a whisper slid in, my own voice bent wrong. Leo. Time to go home. I stumbled back from the screen as if burned. Inside, the cold would not leave. The panel glowed red, airlock engaged. I rushed into the vestibule. The inner door locked, but across the glass a shadow slid into view. It stopped. For an instant, a face peered back. My face, with cat-slit pupils and ashen skin. I hit the override, the system shrieked, and the hatch cycled shut in reverse. Red, yellow, green. Empty again. Just me and my breath. Damn it, I muttered. Back in the central module, a hollow pounding. Then another. Rhythmic, like footsteps on steel. From above, from the dome. I switched cameras, all external feeds, dead. Only the internal net alive. Then I understood, it wasn't outside. It was already inside. Through the ducts came a drag, nails running along pipes. The sound crawled across the ceiling. And the radio said, Leo, open. I've returned, Reed's voice, firm, commanding. It's me. I pressed the mic. Where are you? Silence. Then, in the airlock. But I had just been there. Empty. And I had already seen his face. It wasn't true. I didn't answer. Then the voice shifted. First static, then my own voice, hollow. Leo, I have come home. I threw the radio onto the table, and knew I had two choices. Lock myself in the servers and wait for rescue, or gamble everything and go down again, where it had all begun. I chose the second. The sublevel greeted me with the same stale air. But different, water dripped from the ceiling. The temperature had risen. Old systems were waking. The ladder quivered under my boots, as if someone were descending with me. The laboratory was colder. The sarcophagus, empty again. On the floor, not just blood now. Footprints. Dozens. Narrow, long, crisscrossing. Like scores of feet walking in circles with nowhere to go. At the back, my beam caught an open door. It hadn't been there before. Behind it, a narrow tunnel, wet walls, cracked concrete. From within came voices. They were all speaking. Nina, Reed, even me. Phrases we had spoken. Twisted, overlapped, like someone trying to play every voice it had heard. I went in. My heart hammered so hard it drowned half the sound. Still I walked. Because if I didn't reach the end, the station would never let me leave. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling lost in dark. In the center, a huge circular tank, like a cistern. Its walls blinked with ancient sensors. And in their light, I saw the surface move. Not steel. It was breathing. Something alive, vast, sleeping beneath the ice for decades. The voices joined into one. Inside my skull. We are. You are us. Open. I stepped back. Behind me, a shadow. It moved soundlessly, like snow. In my beam stood Nina's suit. She was there, watching. But her face wasn't a face. Skin smooth, featureless, except for the eyes. And those eyes did not blink. I knew then, they didn't kill right away. They learned, copied, tried to be us, then replaced us. I raised the crowbar, drew breath. In front, the cistern. Behind, the shadow. Above, somewhere in the sky, a plane was coming. Rescue. Hours away. But the question was different. What would they find? Me, or what wore my shape? A laugh broke from me, sharp, broken. If you really are me, then tell me this. I lifted the iron. Why am I still alive? The answer. Silence. On the cistern's skin, handprints appeared. Pressed from inside. Dozens. Hundreds. Some human. Some too long, fingers endless. All beating the same rhythm. I remembered the generators. How to overload the system. The cables ran under my boots. If I stripped protection, dumped the current straight into the cistern, it would all burn. Me, the station, and what breathed here. Nina's shadow shifted, lifted a hand. And her voice, her real voice, warm, human, whispered, "Leo, don't. We can survive. Together." I shut my eyes. I knew it wasn't her. Nina was gone. This was the void, wearing words. I ripped the cover from the breaker box on the wall. Old switches, frost-bitten wires. I jammed a copper pin across the contacts. Sparks blinded me. The metal whined like boiling water. "Forgive me, Nina," I whispered. And I pulled the lever. The explosion wasn't loud. First, light. Blue-white, like the sky torn open. Then, a roar that crushed my ears. The floor dropped, the walls shuddered. The cistern screamed. Not with voices. With a hive torn apart. I fell into darkness. Lost the air. I woke with cold. In the corridor. Above, emergency lamps flickered. The station glowed from within, not fire, but electric blaze. The air trembled. I rose. No shadow. No voices. Only the dying crackle of wires. Above, the dome groaned. The smell of ozone. On the clock, 11 a.m. less than an hour to evacuation. I sat by the airlock, watching the white horizon. A distant rumble. Growing. A plane. I fired a red flare. It carved the gray sky. The plane dipped its wings. I laughed until I coughed. My throat raw, lungs burning. Minutes later, I saw them. Men in orange parkas advancing across the snow. 3. Firm steps, sure silhouettes. One lifted his mask. A tired face. "Are you Technician Leo Kramer?" he asked. "Yes," I answered. "Where are the other crew members?" I looked at the station. The dome still breathed. In its cracks, a flicker, as if something still lived inside. I turned away. "They're dead." The rescuer nodded. Another wrapped me in a blanket. The third held a medkit. All of it too perfect. We walked to the plane. Me between them, not looking back. But inside me, the question, were they human? Or had the station already learned one more shape? On board was warmth. They sat me down, gave me hot tea. I drank, hands shaking worse than before. The leader sat across from me. "We'll need a preliminary report," he said. "What exactly happened here?" I looked into his eyes. Normal. Human. But I knew too well that even normal eyes can lack eyelids. I took another sip. Answered. "System failure. Short circuit. The generator burned out. The others never returned." He nodded. Typed into his tablet. The plane lifted. The station shrank, a speck in white. I closed my eyes. And saw again that face in the camera. Mine. And the voice. "Leo. Time to go home." I understood. I had left. But I didn't know if I'd left alone. The plane flew north, toward a safe sky. I wrapped myself tighter in the blanket, and, for the first time, allowed myself to believe I had escaped. But when the steward handed me a second cup of tea, I froze. On the ceramic, a mark. Thin. Elongated. From fingers too long. I raised my gaze slowly. The man in the orange parka smiled. And could not blink. If this story touched you and you want more, stay with us. Subscribe, leave a like, so you don't miss the moment when the next story knocks at your door. And in the comments, write a single word, the one that stayed with you today. From that word, our next story may begin.